We have spent the last decade obsessed with Industry 4.0, trying to connect every sensor, every robot, and every medical device to the cloud. We built the connected world, but in doing so, we accidentally built the world's largest attack surface. Now, in 2026, we are entering Industry 5.0. It isn't just another marketing iteration. It is a shift from code automation to machine-agent collaboration. But here is the hard truth. You cannot have collaboration without trust. And you cannot have trust if your data is vulnerable to AI poisoning or the looming harvest of the quantum era. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Daniel To from Thales Cybersecurity Product. And today, we are going to discuss a little bit more about how we move past the connectivity hype to secure the integrity of the data-centric future. Industry 4.0 was all about automation, speed, and efficiency. Machines talking to machines, optimizing processes, reducing costs. As a result, this created massive data flows and increased in the attack surfaces. Industry 5.0, on the other end, is all about augmentation. The goal is to put the human back into the loop using AI and collaborative robots, also known as cobots, to handle the heavy lifting while humans provide the creativity, high-level decision-making, and the objective is to build systems that are resilient, ethical, and sustainable. Industry 5.0 focuses on the human and machine collaboration. However, more collaboration also means more data exchanges across what we call the living supply chain. If Industry 4.0 gave us the connected world, I will go as far as to say that Industry 5.0 is giving us the autonomous world. Now, the challenge isn't just about keeping OT, IoT, and medical devices online anymore. It is ensuring that the AI agents making decisions on that data haven't been compromised, and the data itself remains quantum safe for the next decade. This is also why cybersecurity is foundational. In Industry 4.0, cybersecurity was very much of an afterthought. It is a checkbox, a compliance one, a back-office IT-driven function. In Industry 5.0, this is where we have to shift the paradigm of thinking. Trust is always in the data, in AI, and in the autonomous systems that determines whether businesses and societies can function. Cybersecurity is the foundation of resilience in Industry 5.0. Without the trusted data, without secure systems, automation will collapse into chaos. And this is why security must shift from protecting the parameter to protecting the data itself as the data flows between humans, robots, and the AI agents. Now, I would like everybody to think of cybersecurity as the immune system of Industry 5.0. It doesn't just protect, it allows the organism to adapt, recover, and to thrive. For C-level executives at the board level, this means that cybersecurity strategy is no longer separate from the business strategy. It underpins continuity, brand trust, regulatory compliance, and sustainability goals. We must now view cybersecurity as an enabler of Industry 5.0 transformation, not so much as a cost center anymore. Let's use the raw material analogy over here. If Industry 4.0 was powered by automation, Industry 5.0 is powered by data as the raw material. However, unlike oil, data multiplies. When we share that securely, it doesn't diminish. The data grows in value when it is being secured. The digital ecosystem is also now a three-way conversation. Machines produce telemetry, humans produce behavioral data, and AI generates its own outputs. This creates an unprecedented scale and complexity. In 2026, AI is agentic. it makes decisions. Traditional security can't see what's happening inside an AI prompt. Now, with this explosion, it comes with risk. Sensitive data sprawls across hybrid environments, raising the question, who owns it, who controls it, and who can be trusted with that data. AI adds another layer of risk, hallucinations and poisoned dataset. This can mislead not just machines, but also the human beings and the executives making critical decisions. Of course, it is not all risk and danger. With this, it comes with new opportunities. When we handle this correctly, data becomes the foundation of collaborative intelligence. Humans and AI co-creating insights that are richer, faster, and more resilient. When data is trustworthy, it becomes the backbone of resilient systems, ensuring that continuity even in the face of disruptions. Now, my friends, AI creates that new attack surface for that new era that we are in. First and foremost, AI as a double-edged sword. It is not just a defensive tool, it is in fact being weaponized. Attackers can now generate polymorphic malware, launch adaptive phishing attack at scale, even poisoning AI training datasets. Adversarial AI is particularly dangerous because it doesn't just exploit vulnerabilities in our software. It exploits the very decision logic of AI systems that we rely on. Secondly, contributing to the new attack surface is the cyber-physical convergence. In Industry 5.0, where factories, energy grids, hospitals, and transportation are deeply interconnected, the line between cyber risk and physical risk disappears. A successful attack can move from data theft to a production stoppage to human safety incidents within minutes. To aggravate the whole situation, there is also a gap in terms of standards. While the regulations are evolving, they are fragmented. One country's AI security standard doesn't align with another country's. And global supply chains means that your weakest supplier can also be your biggest vulnerability. Now, without a harmonized standard, organizations face very uneven protections and incur higher costs. Last but not least, we cannot forget about the human. Insider threats, intentional or accidental, it remains as one of the most persistent risks that we have been trying to solve for the longest time. At the same time, human operators are also drowning in security alerts. Without explainable, trustworthy AI to filter and contextualize, fatigue sets in and mistakes do happen. This is where resiliency in the systems come in. It really depends a lot on the human and technology collaboration. As we mentioned earlier, Industry 5.0, it is not all about replacing humans with machines. It is about designing systems where human remains as the ethical anchor, as the center of control. Now, AI can tell us what is likely, but only humans can weigh what is right. Machines, we got to view them as a force multipliers because they excel at speed, scale, and spotting patterns in massive data sets. However, machines are only as good as the data pipelines feeding them. A corrupted data pipeline can lead to false predictions, and in a cyber-physical environment, that can mean halted production or even safety risk. And this is where we need the role of explainability of the AI to come in. Now, if we want executives, operators, and citizens to trust AI, we believe that it cannot be a black box. A explainable AI provides a feedback loop where humans can interrogate the model, validate its reasoning, and intervene whenever necessary. This synergy reduces error rates, builds trust, and not just in technology, but in the organizations deploying that AI. There comes with it a strategic implication. For leaders, the future is not just about choosing humans or machines. It is really about building secure ecosystems where humans and machines enhance each other's strengths and where cybersecurity ensures that the partnership is reliable. Now, let's talk a little bit about why trust matters. In Industry 5.0, resilience doesn't come just from the strong machines. It comes from the trusted data powering those machines. We really cannot emphasize this enough. It is all about the trusted data. A system is only as resilient as the quality and security of the data it depends on. If you are familiar with the classical CIA triad, now this classic cybersecurity model, which consists of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. However, Industry 5.0 requires more because now executives need to know not just whether is my data safe, but can I verify its origin? Can I trust its accuracy? This is where concepts like data lineage and data verifiability comes in. We must now look at trusted pipelines as the next generation of enabler. Data must be classified at the point of data creation, encrypted at the point of data in motion, encrypted at the point of data at rest. It must be monitored during use. It must be validated at consumption. So this builds a trusted data pipeline that not just enable AI, it's going to enable robotics and most importantly, decision making to function reliably, even in hostile environments. Some time back, zero trust began as a network concept, which is that we do not assume every and any connection is safe. In Industry 5.0, we can extend the same zero trust concept to data. To every dataset, every transaction, every model input, it must be continuously validated. So this ensures that when humans and machines act on data, they are acting on truth and not manipulation. There are some barriers that stops us from securing a resilient Industry 5.0. First and foremost, standards fragmentation. One of the biggest gaps today is the lack of harmonized standards. Europe, the US, and Asia are moving quickly, but they are also moving in different directions. Without global baselines for AI and robotic security, organizations operating across borders face inconsistent protections, and attackers exploit these gaps in the system. Secondly, data governance is also becoming more and more complex. Data sovereignty is becoming the new battleground. Every government wants control, every regulation demands compliance, and industries are caught in the middle. This fragmentation in data governance not only raises the cost of compliance, it also slows the ability to build resilient and collaborative data ecosystems. Thirdly, let's talk about utility versus protection. We need data to drive the collaboration between humans and machines and between human machines and AI. But every time we share the data, what we are doing, knowingly or unknowingly, is to expand the attack surface. Emerging technologies like federated learning or secure computation, they can help, but they are still niche, complex, and expensive. Now, I guess the strategic message over here is the real challenge isn't just technology. It is about combining governance, cooperation, and global alignment. If we do not close these gaps, Industry 5.0 risks being built on fragile foundations. If we want to build a resilient and human-centric security for Industry 5.0, there are three key pillars that we ought to look at. First and foremost, from protection to resilience. The future of cybersecurity, it is not about avoiding every data breach. It is about building systems that can bend, adapt, and recover quickly. Our executives should be asking, how do we measure resilience? How fast can our systems return to trusted operations after a disruption? Secondly, we need to look at the human and machine collaboration as part of our systems design principles. We must design systems that do not drown human operators in alerts, but to empower them with actionable insights. Explainable AI and intuitive interfaces means that our operators can validate, challenge, and refine machine-driven recommendations. This is where the real trust from data comes from. Thirdly, we need to look at global standards as a strategic imperative. Because today, no companies, no organization is an island. Supply chains are global today. Without harmonized standards, data risk leaks through the weakest partner. Industry leaders must push for international collaboration to define what secure AI and data use looks like, just as what we did with aviation safety decades ago. This is what I would like everyone to do, a strategic call to action. Pathways require leadership. It is not just about the technology. The companies, the government that lead in resilience, collaboration, and standard setting will define the future of Industry 5.0. And this is where I want to share a little bit to frame what Thales is doing in Industry 5.0 in this domain. At Thales, we do not just protect networks or devices. We secure trust itself, trust in the data. And in Industry 5.0, trust is the most valuable asset. Our history of working with governments, regulators, industry partners, the largest companies in the world, it means that we are not just following standards. We are helping to write them. This matters because fragmented standards are one of the biggest gaps we identified earlier. We need to switch gears and take a data-centric approach. Because at Thales, we believe that cybersecurity in Industry 5.0, it must be data first. It is not enough to just secure our parameters. We must secure the data itself across its entire data lifecycle. Now, this is how you create trustworthy pipelines that power resilient AIs and robotics. Looking ahead, quantum resilience and quantum computing is one of the most important factors we have to look at. Quantum computing poses one of the greatest existential risks to digital trust. Our investment in post-quantum security ensures that Industry 5.0 won't just be resilient today, but also 20 years from now. Last but not least, human-centric cybersecurity. We place human at the center of everything we do. Cybersecurity should empower our operators, our executives, and citizens with clarity, not just complexity. And this is why our focus on explainable, ethical, and human-aligned security solutions is very, very important. Earlier on, we spoke about post-quantum risk. In post-quantum risk, we talk about the harvest now and decrypt later problem. This is what happens today. The adversaries and the attackers are collecting encrypted data, waiting for the day for the quantum computer to be ready before they decrypt the previously collected and harvested data. At Thales, one of the quick wins that we have been prescribing is to do encryption at the network layer, doing it point to point, a bump in the wire. Using concepts like high-speed encryptor, what we can do is to deny the attacker to understand the underlying data transmitted over the wire. The encryption provided by the high-speed encryptors are PQC ready today. The immediate outcome, we buy time for system owners, we stop the harvest now and decrypt later problem, stopping man-in-the-middle attacks, and most importantly, it is negligible impact to all kinds of networks in the OT world, IoT world, and the medical devices world. To summarize the presentation, I would like to reinforce the message and the theme. And if there's one message to leave with today, it is this. Cybersecurity is no longer just protection, it is the enabler of Industry 5.0. The collaboration call out over here is the complexity of this era demands collaboration across industries, nations, and different disciplines. No single company, no single government or sector can do this alone. The trustworthiness of our data pipelines will define the resilience of our economies, our infrastructures, and our society. And this is where AI data security posture management becomes necessary. We need to know what sensitive data is fed into our systems and our pipelines, and we do need to block prompt injections in real time. For our leaders in the boardroom, it is an imperative. The question is no longer, should cybersecurity be a board level issue? It is, how do we embed cybersecurity into every decision as the backbone of our Industry 5.0 strategy? Closing off the topic, this is now our opportunity to design a future that is not just efficient, but ethical, sustainable, and resilient. Cybersecurity will be the compass that guides us there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. To find out more, please visit www.talusgroup.com/en/cybersecurity. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Dr. Charles Wu, CEO of Think Cloud Technology, Taiwan. Today, I want to challenge a widely held assumption that blockchain alone is enough to secure the future of digital assets. It isn't, and I'm going to show you exactly what's missing and how we've already built the solution. Real-world asset tokenization is the process of converting ownership rights of property, art, commodities, financial instruments into digital tokens on a blockchain. It promises fractional ownership, instant settlement, and global liquidity. The market is moving fast, but here's the question nobody is asking loudly enough. Blockchain secures the record. Who secures the human behind it? Let's talk about the scale of what's happening. In early 2023, the total on-chain RWA market was essentially zero. By March 2026, it has crossed $25.3 billion, and that number is accelerating. Industry projections have this market reaching the trillions by 2030. What's driving it? In 2024, private credit dominated the landscape, but by early 2026, we've seen a significant shift. U.S. Treasury debt has emerged as the primary driver at $10.67 billion, followed by commodities at $5.44 billion. This tells us something important. Institutional capital, the most conservative, compliance-driven money in the world, is now moving on-chain. The infrastructure question is no longer, will this market exist? It already does. The question is, who provides the trust layer that allows it to scale safely?
To understand the problem we're solving today, I want to take you back 5,000 years. Before formal currency, humans bartered, but barter had a fundamental flaw. You couldn't record deferred value. You couldn't prove what was agreed, or by whom. Commerce was limited to what two people could remember standing in the same place. Then, around 3500 BCE, the Sumerians changed everything. They pressed cuneiform script into clay tablets to record grain inventories, land ownership, and transactions. The clay itself represented physical goods, permanent, tamper-evident, impossible to quietly alter. They became the world's first trust infrastructure. And then we found the Kushim tablet. The symbols Ku and Sim inscribed on the tablet likely referred to an administrator or accountant, marking the earliest known transition from anonymous bartering to a recorded system of accountability. That tells you everything about what commerce actually runs on. Trust, recorded, verifiable, accountable trust. And the history of human commerce since then has been one continuous journey, finding more reliable carriers for that trust and value.
The Sumerians gave us clay, but as trade expanded globally, the complexity of transactions outpaced what any single ledger could hold. The Renaissance gave us the next breakthrough, double-entry bookkeeping. For the first time, merchants could systematically track both debits and credits, every transaction recorded twice, creating an internal check on integrity. This was revolutionary. It created a paper trail that could be audited, verified, and challenged. But that paper trail still depended entirely on the physical presence of the parties involved and their handwritten signatures to be legally binding. The paper was trustworthy, the identity behind the signature still a matter of faith. So the evolutionary path of RWA record-keeping looks like this. Sumerian cuneiform solved the problem of recording value. Renaissance double-entry bookkeeping solved the problem of tracking it. The paper era solved the problem of distributing it across borders and cultures. And now, the SVS file revolution solves the problem that every prior era left unsolved, proving beyond legal doubt who signed, when, where, and with what intent.
Paper, for all its simplicity, is a remarkable trust carrier. It works across every culture, every region, every legal system. Once ink seeps into paper fibers, tampering becomes physically visible. The document itself becomes its own evidence. But digital changed the game, and not entirely for the better. Digital content is inherently easy to copy, modify, and replicate. A static image of a signature on a screen proves only one thing, that a mark was made. It cannot prove who made it. Anyone with access to that device, a colleague, a family member, a bad actor, could have drawn those characters. Unlike paper, where ink depth and pressure leave forensic traces, a digital scribble carries zero biometric data. And that creates a very serious legal vulnerability. A signer can stand in court and say, "I didn't sign that, someone else used my tablet." And without non-repudiation, that claim is extremely difficult to disprove. This is the digital trust gap, and it is the single biggest barrier preventing RWA tokenization from reaching its full legal and institutional potential, because you cannot tokenize a $10 million property deed on the back of a signature that can be repudiated in court.
There's a famous saying in the crypto world, "Not your keys, not your coins." It captures a brutal truth that in blockchain, possession of the private key is everything. Lose it, and you lose your assets. Hand it to someone else, and you hand them control. Blockchain did solve real problems: double spending, record tampering, copying. But two new problems emerged that blockchain cannot fix by itself. First, self-custody risk. A man in Wales accidentally discarded a hard drive containing 500 million pounds in Bitcoin. He now wants to excavate an entire landfill to find it. No recovery mechanism, no appeal. The asset exists on-chain, perfectly intact, but is completely unreachable forever. Second, third-party risk. The U.S. Department of Justice seized 127,000 Bitcoin in the pig butchering scam bust. Trusting a centralized exchange with your keys means trusting them with everything, and governments, hackers, and fraudsters all know it. The pattern is clear. Whether you hold the key yourself or give it to someone else, the system has no reliable way to link a blockchain key to a verified human identity. That's not a blockchain problem. That is a human problem, and it requires a human-centered solution. As real-world assets move toward a trillion-dollar digital market, we need to be honest about what it actually takes to get there. From my perspective, having worked on both the technology and the legislation, there are 5 non-negotiable prerequisites for RWA tokenization to function at institutional scale. Interoperability. The system must work across different platforms, borders, and legal systems. Legal validity. Every token must be backed by a signature that holds up in court. Immutability. The record must be tamper-proof once established. Accountability. There must be a named, verifiable human behind every transaction. And human intent. The system must be able to prove not just that something was signed, but that a conscious, consenting person chose to sign it. These 5 factors are the trust bridge between a physical asset and a line of blockchain code. Blockchain handles immutability well. It cannot, on its own, deliver legal validity, accountability, or proof of human intent. Those 3 are the critical barriers to entry that have kept institutional capital on the sidelines. SVS was designed specifically to clear all 3.
The eureka moment behind SelfieSign's SVS file came from an unlikely place: professional tennis. Watching players sign the camera lens after a victory, I noticed how 3 things were captured in a single act: the signature, the physical mark; the face, live visual proof of identity; and the willingness, the conscious live active signing, proving the signer was present and consenting. Identity, action, intent, all at once. The .svs file is not a flat PDF signature. It is a living container, capturing photo, voice, contract, signature, video, and geolocation, all simultaneously bundled into a single encrypted file. Look at the layer diagram on the right. There are 3 distinct layers in every .svs file: the video layer, capturing the human event; the document layer, carrying the legal content; and the electronic signature layer, providing the cryptographic seal. All 3 are inseparable. All 3 are court admissible. The SVS file is also ISO 27001 certified, EIDS compliant, GDPR ready. Let me show you exactly how it works, because this is where .svs separates itself from every other e-signature solution on the market. A standard PDF e-signature, PODES, creates a flat image on a document, a scribble, legally weak, forensically empty, easily repudiated. SelfieSign does something fundamentally different. The moment you begin signing, the front-facing camera opens. Your video, audio, and signing motion are recorded in real time. Your biometric data is captured as you write. And all of this, the document, the signature, the video, the audio, the metadata, is bundled into a single encrypted .svs file built on the X8A standard. This is a human-centric record, not a flat image of a mark, a living forensic record of a conscious human authorization event, and it is now the gold standard for high-stakes asset digitalization.
Here's something most people in digital asset markets don't fully appreciate. Not all digital formats are legally equal. A line sticker, an email, a Word document, none of these constitute valid legal documentation for formal transactions. The European Union recognized this and established a hierarchy of trusted electronic document standards: PAT-As, X-Aids, CAT-As, and J-Aids. These formats exist specifically to ensure the integrity and immutability of digital documents that need to hold up in court, in regulatory review, and across decades. SelfieSign SVS file is built on X-Aids, the most flexible and forensically robust of these standards, supporting long-term validity, parallel and serial signatures, and full XML data integrity. When we say our signatures are legally binding, we don't mean contractually aspirational. We mean EU standard, court-admissible, forensically provable.
While most e-signature solutions use PAT-As, a static PDF, SelfieSign uses Access-based .svs files. A .svs file is a multimedia bundle. It contains facial video, biometric proof of who signed, voice recording, oral confirmation of consent, signing motion, capturing the physical behavioral biometrics of the act itself, and metadata, geolocation, device ID, and timestamps for complete forensic traceability. This solves three problems that current blockchain and tokenization approaches cannot. First, legal foundation. Tokenization cannot skip the legal layer. A valid electronic signature must exist before a token has legal standing. Second, the safety net. If a blockchain key is ever compromised, the .svs file survives as independent legal evidence of the signer's original intent. The asset is not lost. Third, the blind signing problem. Blockchain verifies keys, not humans. Users regularly sign complex smart contract code they don't understand, leaving them exposed to phishing and fraud. .svs anchors every transaction to a verified human being who consciously consented.
Let me make this very concrete. A standard e-signature, lowest non-repudiation. A handwritten signature, higher but still challengeable without forensic analysis. SelfieSign's .svs signature, the highest level of non-repudiation available in any commercial e-signature product today. Voice, video, watermark, timestamp, GPS, IP, and PKI, all captured simultaneously. No other solution on the market combines all seven.
Today, we are securing the world's most valuable markets by transforming how trust is created, verified, and transferred. From real estate tokenization, where property deeds and fractional ownership agreements demand unquestionable proof, to fine art and collectibles, where provenance and authenticity define value, to global commodity trading, where multi-party supply chains require secure and transparent agreements. The common denominator is trust, and trust must be undeniable. The .svs file acts as an all-in-one authorization container that replicates the physical act of signing and stamping a document, but with far greater security, portability, and global compliance. Consider this e-check, for example. It contains, first, a human-centric video signature, capturing real-time video, voice, and biometric markers to prove authentic intent. Second, digital wallet integration, securely storing identity credentials and private keys, enabling seamless cross-border transactions. Third, embedded corporate seals, digital e-stamps functioning as official organizational signbars, ensuring institutional accountability alongside individual intent, creating full-spectrum accountability. The technical foundation is the W3C DID standard, enabling true ownership of digital identity through decentralized identifiers. The legal engine is eIDAS 2.0, ensuring that an SVS file signed with a qualified electronic signature is legally recognized across Europe. Execution happens through the EU Digital Identity Wallet. Think of it as a super wallet that securely holds government IDs, credentials, and private keys. And interoperability is powered by eSIF under the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, creating a trust triangle where issuers provide credentials, holders control them, and verifiers instantly validate them. The result is a digitally native instrument that preserves the ceremonial authority of paper while embedding global compliance, sovereign identity, and institutional trust directly into the transaction itself. This is how we secure the world's most valuable markets. The digitalization and tokenization of physical assets, from real estate and fine art to bonds and gold, is not just a technical upgrade. It fundamentally changes how capital flows. Let me share a case study that brings this concept into live execution. In 2023, for Yomiuri TV's primetime drama Our Boring Love Theory,
artist E. Okamoto created the manga visuals for Triangle Table. The artwork became central to the storyline, appearing on covers, promotional materials, and exhibition displays. We saw an opportunity to go further by tokenizing these pieces. Using SelfieSign's .svs autograph NFT framework, we solved the connection problem, directly linking the physical artwork to its digital token. We captured forensic-grade video-based signature evidence from the artist and embedded it into the NFT. By doing this, we permanently and forensically connected the artwork's digital identity to its creator and transformed a television drama prop into a verifiable, liquid, real-world asset.
To meet the demands of trillion-dollar asset authorization, SelfieSign has also integrated a sophisticated multi-dimensional AI verification engine that operates across 3 layers. Static e-signature analysis examines the structural characteristics and ink patterns of the final signature. Motion e-signature analysis tracks the behavioral biometrics of the signing process: speed, stroke order, rhythm, patterns that are unique to each individual and nearly impossible to forge. And facial recognition cross-references the live video stream against the signer's registered biometric profile in real time. These 3 layers verify simultaneously, dramatically increasing accuracy and making the system resilient against any single point of attack.
You've seen how our AI verification model works. Now, let's talk about why it matters. As real-world asset markets scale, so does the sophistication of presentation attacks. Unlike traditional active liveness systems that require users to blink or turn their heads, approaches that feel awkward and can be spoofed, our passive liveness detection operates silently in the background. The AI analyzes micromovements, skin texture, depth, and light reflection patterns that photos, screens, masks, and synthetic media simply cannot replicate. We specifically train our model to neutralize 4 primary threat vectors: photo attacks, video replay attacks, mask attacks, and deepfake attacks. We validate performance using the security metrics that matter: accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score, delivering enterprise-grade reliability at the exact moment of authorization. This ensures that your RWA assets remain truly unhackable.
Global Layer 1 is an initiative launched by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, in 2023 to create a public-private partnership and a publicly funded distributed ledger technology, DLT, infrastructure for cross-border tokenized asset transactions. The project expanded its membership in 2024 and released a toolkit in November 2025 to advance financial infrastructure. This is the clearest signal yet that institutional-grade tokenization infrastructure is no longer theoretical. The world's most credible financial regulators and technologists are actively building the rails. As these rails take shape, one question becomes increasingly urgent. Who provides the human trust layer on top? The infrastructure is being built, but the identity and authorization standard is still open.
I want to speak personally for a moment, because our credibility here is not only technical, it is legislative. Taiwan's Electronic Signature Act had not been meaningfully updated in over 20 years. In 2024, that changed. I served as a legislation consultant to the Ministry of Digital Affairs on the revised act, directly shaping how Taiwan defines a legally valid digital signature going forward. My central advocacy was for what I call the technological neutrality principle. Laws must not be written to protect legacy PKI infrastructure. They must be written to accommodate the technologies of tomorrow: dynamic biometrics, video signatures, behavioral authentication. Through ThinkCloud's leadership, we also mobilized an industry coalition that ultimately persuaded the executive yuan to pass the amendment draft. We didn't just build the product that complies with the law. We helped write the law that the product is built for. I'll close with some numbers, because vision without proof is just a pitch. SelfieSign has achieved something remarkable in Taiwan's healthcare system, one of the most rigorous, high-stakes environments for digital documentation on Earth. Of Taiwan's 130,000-plus hospital beds, over 80,000 are supported by SelfieSign technology. 70% of national medical centers, the most prestigious Tier 1 research hospitals, trust us. 80% of chain hospital groups have adopted us at enterprise scale, and we process 2.2 million legally binding documents every month. That clinical track record has opened doors into Taiwan's most strictly regulated sectors: banking, securities, insurance, and real estate. E-Sun Bank, KGI Bank, Taiwan Business Bank, KGI Securities, Uwantis Securities, TransGlobe Life, Sinyi Realty. These are institutions with zero tolerance for identity fraud and legal loopholes. They chose SelfieSign. SelfieSign is not just a startup with a vision. It is a proven platform, battle-tested in the hardest environments, ready to become the trust layer for the global RWA market.
Thank you. The QR code on screen gives you a live SelfieSign experience, where you'll see exactly what I've described today in action. I'd welcome any questions, and I look forward to exploring how .svs can become the foundation of trust for your organization's digital asset strategy.
Hello everyone, I'm Six from convenes product marketing. For decades, memory was just a warehouse, a place to store your photos, your apps, your data. Simple storage. But today, the world is changing. Everything is connected. Everything is AI driven. Storage isn't enough anymore. We are moving from simple storage to a root of trust. Today, we are going to talk about how convenes is building the foundation of security inside the silicon itself. Let's dive in. Here is the map for our journey today. First, we will look at the scary threat out there. Then we will talk about the root of trust, the first domino of security. I will show you why your flash memory needs to be a shield, not just a box. Then we will talk about our ArmorFace series of products. And finally, I will leave you with a vision for a secure, quantum-ready future. Think about this. Hackers are getting smarter. They don't just attack your software anymore. They attack the hardware. They attack the wires. Look at these three threats. Rollback attacks, where they force your device to use old buggy code. Key extraction, where they literally scrape your secret keys out of the chip. And bus snooping, where they listen to data moving between the CPU and the memory. If your memory is down, your system is wide open, then we have to fix it. The danger starts long before the device is on your desk. It starts in the global supply chain. From design to the factory, there are so many places to tamper with a chip. But there is a bigger storm coming, the quantum threat. Hackers are doing something called harvest now, decrypt later. They are stealing your encrypted data today, waiting for a quantum computer to crack it tomorrow. Our current security will be obsolete soon. We must prepare now. Governments are waking up. From the US White House to the EU and Japan, new laws are being passed. Security is no longer an option. It's a legal requirement. Supply chain risk management is the new standard. If you want to build for the global market, your hardware must be trusted. This is the new reality of the tech industry. So, how do we fight back? It starts with a root of trust. Think of it as the trust anchor. If the very first piece of code is trust, it can verify the next piece and the next. We call this the chain of trust. From the moment you hit the power button, every layer, the firmware, the OS, the apps, is verified. Security must be built in, not added on. This is the magic part. Traditional security stores keys in memory, but if a hacker finds them, they are gone. At Macronics, we use PUF. We call it silicon biometrics. Just like your fingerprint, every chip has tiny, unique physical difference from the factory. We use this to create keys on the fly. The key only exists when you need it. Then it dissolves. You cannot steal what isn't there. Isn't that incredible? In the past, security was hidden inside the main processor, but today's chips are so complex, we have to move memory outside. But the moment you moved it outside, it's vulnerable to both snooping and IP theft. Hackers can clone your expensive AI model. That's why we need external secure flash. It's not just memory, it's a security vault for your digital life. Let's compare. Conventional flash is passive. The CPU asks for data and the flash just gives it. It doesn't ask questions. However, security flash is active. It has a built-in security engine. It checks the digital signature before it allows the system to boot. It is the trust anchor for your firmware. No signature, no boot. Simple and effective. Our security flash is a Swiss Army knife of security. Rollback protection? Yes. Security boot? Yes. Device authentication? Absolutely. We use the PUF to lock the memory chip to the main processor. They become a married couple. Only they can talk to each other. This stops cloning and stops hack code. We also protect the supply chain. We provide manufacturer and the device certificate. When a chip arrives at your factory, you can run an acceptance check immediately. You know exactly who made it and that it hasn't been tampered with. It's a clear, transparent chain of trust from our fab to your customer. We have developed a specialized family of armor flash products to meet these needs. From the RPNC NX77 for repair protection to the Armor Ocean MX74 for device identity. Our flagship is the Armor Quantum MX79, which is post-quantum ready and CNSA 2.0 compliant. These chips use the latest algorithms designed to survive an attack from a quantum computer. As you can see on this slide, Armor Flash is designed to be completely compatible with your existing system architecture. It uses the same physical SPI pins and protocols that your engineers are already using today. This means no new hardware controllers are required on your SoC and no complex PCB redesigns are needed. It is truly plug and play. from a hardware perspective. The Marconi's path is our core innovation. Just as no two humans have the same fingerprints, no two chips, even from the same wafer, are identical at the microscopic level. This second biometrics provides non-replicable identity. Not even Marconi's can clone a chip's ID. Hardware to host binding. It cryptographically locks the memory to its specific authorized SOC. The quantum anchor. It provides the high entropy foundation required for next generation PQC algorithms. To defend against modern threats such as supply chain attack, cyber coding, quantum harvesting, and agentic AI, we need more than just passwords. We need second biometrics. This is where the Marconi's path comes in. Look at this. This is the science behind the magic. In the old world, we use a unique ID, but a standard ID is predictable. It's duplicable. It can be cloned by a clever attacker. But look at Marconi's path. It is nature. It is random. Whether it's 128 bits or 512 bits, it's pure entropy. Isn't it predictable? No. Is it clonable? Absolutely not. Even we, the manufacturer, cannot recreate the identity of a chip once it leaves our fab. Let's look at how they work in the real world. Armor Ocean handles device-to-device trust. It verifies manufacturer and the device certificate to stop clones. Armor Boot uses a hash function to create a digital fingerprint of your boot code. If even one bit of that code is changed, the system will detect it and refuse to start. Meanwhile, Armor Flash protects your most sensitive data, like financial information, medical logs, or biometric fingerprints, by encrypting data so it never travels across the bus in clear text. Marconi's provides a complete end-to-end solution that utilizes a standard SPI interface. This allows you to choose the exact level of protection your applications needs, from standard IoT device to post-quantum infrastructure, all while maintaining the convenience of your existing system architecture. Our solution applies to many areas: networking, automotive, and AI edge devices. All these systems require strong security. If you remember one thing today, let it be this: real security begins in silicon, not as a software patch. We must move from thinking about storage to thinking about trust. By using a hardware root of trust and preparing for post-quantum security, we create a foundation that lasts. Let's build a safer future together. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Akers. If you look at most organizations today, there's no shortage of tools, no shortage of frameworks, but that hasn't really made things easier. What's missing isn't technology, it's how we make decisions. So in this session, let's start with something familiar, decisions. Every cybersecurity investment comes with a trade-off. If we spend here, we're not investing somewhere else. Maybe that means less for growth, less for innovations, or less for investing in people. So the question isn't whether security matters. The real question is how do we decide where to spend and how much is enough. That's what I call it. Cybersecurity as capital allocations. It's a mindset shift, treating security as an investment decision, not just another operational headache. In this session, I'd like to share why cyber risk quantification, or CRQ, is becoming so critical, especially here in Asia, and more importantly, how it helps us make better choices. So, I'll show you a practical way to look at risk, a way to find a common language, so security, finance, and the board can actually understand each other without missing the point. Before we go further, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Akers Cool. Most of my work sits between risk, finance, and technology. I currently serve as the Secretary General of the Taiwan Risk Governance and Measurement Association, and I'm also co-founder of the FAIR Institute Taiwan chapter. Over the years, I've picked up certifications like CFE, CISA, and OpenFAIR. I also completed a PhD because I was looking for a more rigorous way to understand risk. But that's not what changed my perspective. It's an experience of working inside large organizations where teams face budget limits and regulatory pressure. And in that environment, you quickly realize something. We don't really need more general theories. We need a common language. That's why I'm so interested in cyber risk quantification, not as a technical exercise, but as a practical way to connect security work with business decisions. And that's a perspective I'd like to share with you. Let's go back for a moment. Think about the financial world just before 2008. Everything appeared structured and under control. Ratings were high, reports looked positive, and the models looked quite advanced. Because everything seems calm, people started to believe something dangerous. Banks trusted the ratings, investors trusted the numbers, and as long as the tower didn't move, everyone assumed the risk were under control. But as we now know, that stability was fragile, like a Jenga tower built on weak assumptions. Behind those trivial labels were weak loans and complex structures that very few people truly understood. People were busy checking compliance boxes, but not looking at the real exposure. And we all know how that story ended. When that tower finally collapsed, it was already too late to react. So why am I bringing this here? Because today, I see a very similar patterns in our own industries. We have our own trivial ratings, we call them certifications, maturity models, nice looking dashboards. On paper, a lot of organizations look mature, they look compliant. But looking good on paper doesn't mean we're actually resilient. Once again, we start to think stability means safety. And that's precisely what makes today's situation so dangerous. But here's an interesting part. In every major crisis, there's always a small group who doesn't simply follow a crowd. Before the 2008 collapse, where everyone else trusted the AAA ratings, a few investors started looking deeper. They stopped trusting the labels and started asking different questions. They focused on three things. First, impact. They didn't settle for words like high or critical. At some point, it comes down to one question. If this goes wrong, how much could we lose? Then, likelihood. Not general statistics, not industry averages. How likely is the scenario to happen? And finally, resilience. Could they survive the heat if the worst case scenario happens? And notice the shift here. They weren't asking about compliance or rating animals. The questions become simpler. How much could this cost us? How likely is it? These are not technical problems, they're business decisions. And because they ask better questions, they make better decisions. This is the mindset behind cyber risk quantifications. It's about moving away from checklists and moving toward clear decisions. Now, let's bring this back to Asia. When we look at the data, one number really stands out, 12%. Take a second to think about that. In our region, only about 1 in 10 organizations actually quantify cyber risk, which means most of them don't. And to be clear, people do care about security. It's more about how decisions are typically made in many organizations here. First, there is an experience-driven culture. We often trust the judgment and intuitions of leaders who have seen many situations before, and that experience is valuable. But today's cyber environment changes fast, and intuition alone is no longer enough. Second, there's the weight of hierarchy and consensus. Important decisions often go through many layers. Everyone wants alignment, everyone wants to play safe. And sometimes the conversations become slow and move away from the actual risk itself. And third, we face structural challenges. Data is often siloed. IT, security, and finance don't always speak the same language. And there's rarely a shared metric that brings it all together. So, what happens in practice? Decisions are still made and budgets are still spent, but often based on perceptions or past habits. This is what I call the silent decision. Because every year, organizations make major cybersecurity investments, but they don't really know which risk they are actually reducing. So, while many organizations still rely heavily on experience and intuition, it helps to look at the wider market, and especially at insurers. After all, they are the ones who pay when things go wrong, and they see things very differently. They are actually using data and modeling to do this. They analyze loss data, they model scenarios, and they price risk very precisely. And this is creating a real shift in Asia. As you can see on this slide, cybercrimes have increased by around 50%. But here's the part that stands out. Insurance rates are actually going down. At first, this feels a bit unusual. More losses, but lower prices. But there's the reality. This isn't a price cut, it's a repricing. The market is becoming far more selective. If you have strong controls and clear risk data, and the market rewards you, you get better terms and lower premiums. But when visibility is limited, the market priced that uncertainty differently. You may see higher deductibles, more exclusions. Many organizations only realize this at renewal. By then, the market is already using data to price risk, and intuition alone simply isn't enough. It starts to become a real strategic risk, and this means something important. Cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue for IT. It has become a core business challenge. So, we've looked at the market, but what does it look like in real life? At the end of the day, almost every security conversation in the ballroom hits the same wall. And that wall called budget. The reality is, no organization has unlimited resources. If you look at the trend here in Taiwan, budgets have grown. You can see the numbers on the slide, but they don't quite match the scale of today's threats. Even looking toward 2026, many teams are still working with budgets that only cover parts of their actual risk exposure. And this puts CISOs and security leaders in very difficult positions. And in many cases, these investment decisions are not made from clear data. And here is a danger. A limited budget doesn't just mean that security. It often ends up creating unbalanced security. So, what's actually missing here? Now, think about what happens when security reports reach your board. So, what do we actually see? Maturity scores, heat maps, those familiar red, yellow, and green dots. But those colors really answer the question business leaders really care about. Without a decision-rating matrix, the conversation stays stuck in technical details. And we all know what happened next. When the conversation stays technical, budget decisions become political. That's the real gap. So in many cases, this isn't really a technical problem. It's more about language problems. Security speaks in controls, the bold speaks in capital. So let's get to the key points. What actually changes when CRQ enters the conversation? First, and most importantly, we translate risk into the language of money. We move beyond red, yellow, and greens, beyond high, medium, and low. Instead, we talk about financial exposure. And once cyber is in financial terms, we can now talk about it like any other business risk. Second, CRQ makes trade-off visible. And this changes the decision process. Instead of what feels urgent, we can be more precise. Third, CRQ allows us to compare investment fairly. Security projects are not just technical costs. They are capital allocation decisions just like any other investment. And in practice, CRQ doesn't just give us numbers. What it really gives us is a common language, a bridge that allows security, finance, and the board to sit at the same table and talk about the same things in the same way. To simplify this, let's think about it as two different ways of seeing risk. On the left, we have what I call the perception-based world. This is where many organizations operate today. We use red, yellow, green dashboards. We follow checklists we focus strongly on compliance. And in this world, the audit reports often drive the conversation. And to be fair, there's nothing wrong with this approach. It gives structure, it gives accountability. But as we've seen, it doesn't always give us the financial clarity needed for difficult decisions. Now look at the right side, the exposure-based approach. Here, we move away from cadres and toward capital. Risk is expressed in financial terms. We turn to understand how much risk is reduced for each dollar spent. If we look at it from a perception perspective, the question is simple. Are we compliant? But if we look at it from an exposure perspective, it becomes a different question. Are we economically resilient? One focuses on the past, the other focuses on the future. At this point, people tend to think the same. This sounds great, but is it going to be complex? Does it take years and a huge budget? The short answer is no. You don't need a big bang transformation. You don't need to rebuild your entire framework. What I usually tell my teams is very simple. Just start small. I usually think of it in a very simple way. First, choose one scenario. Don't try to model everything. Maybe a ransomware attack that stops operation for 3 days. Something everyone can picture easily. Second, focus on one decision. Choose an investment already being discussed. And third, bring it into one forum. Take an insight into a real meeting and simply observe how the conversation changes. So, start small, one scenario, one decision. No need for massive overhaul, just a real conversation with a bit more clarity. And once leadership sees how this shifts the discussion into a business decision, the next step comes quite naturally. If there's one thing I hope you remember from this session, cyber risk quantification isn't really about math, not about complex models, not about software. At its core, it's about conversations. And when we move from intuition to evidence, leaders gain something they often struggle to find: competence. Not because risk disappears, but because uncertainty becomes something measurable and manageable. That's a shift worth considering, moving from compliance to actually understanding exposure, from controls to thinking about how we allocate resources, and maybe most importantly, moving from intuition to something we can support with evidence. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. We all know cybersecurity isn't about preventing every single attack. So the real question isn't how we stop the inevitable. The real question is this: are we stable before the impact arrives? Because when a major incident happens, it's already too late to start doing the math, too late to justify budgets, and definitely too late to explain risk exposure. Quantification isn't a crystal ball. It's not about predicting the future. It's about preparation. It allows an organization to understand the financial shock before it actually happens. It allows us to see the fragile blocks in the tower while there is still time to act. So maybe it's not about whether we can afford to implement CRQ. The real question is simple. Can we afford not to quantify it? Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope this session gives you a slightly different way to look at cyber risk. If any of these ideas resonate with you, or if you are exploring how to bring quantified thinking into your own organizations, please feel free to connect with me. Thank you and look forward to continue the conversation.
Have you ever thought of what if information security is a martial art? In this session, I hope to provide you some of guidelines and tips of how to build an integrated and sustainable security governance model. My name is Wanju Chen. I have over 10 years of experiences in cybersecurity across different industries such as education, banking, pharmaceutical, and energy sectors. I feel honored to be invited as a guest speaker for CYBERSEC Global 2026 this year. And I believe when you walk away from this session, you will feel confident and equipped for building your own security program. So let's go back to our original question. What if information security is a martial art? If you really think about it, blue team it's on the defensive side of security, and red team is on the offensive side of security. And Sun Tzu, an ancient Chinese military master, used to say, 知己知彼，百战百胜, meaning knowing yourself and know your enemy. In a thousand battle, you will know no peril. So how do we apply martial art to information security? I'd like to use a scenario of Alice and Bob, who both work for an airline company called XYZ. They both love martial arts and are now tasked to build a strong security program. And data is everywhere for their company. So they have the same goal of protecting the company data. But the thing is, they found lots of security tools out there. But why are they still dealing with multiple incidents, security incidents, frequently? And they found they don't even know if those security tools are being used. So they figure tools without integration create false confidence. So they got an idea of using the supreme martial art introduced by this martial art novel, 天龙八部, which is written by Jin Yong in 1960s. This is one of his renowned novel work. So Alice and Bob would like to use the supreme martial art, 6 Paul's divine swords, which is legendary energy technique using internal force to form invisible blades. But in order to do this technique, there's a foundational martial art called One Young Finger, which is famous finger technique for healing and attack. So you see, One Young Finger is using one finger to do the work. And you really need to know how to do one and then do the 6. And when you got to the 6 fingers of techniques, you need to really get an internal force, which is another martial art called Bei Ming, divine power, which absorbs and transfers others' chi, internal force, to yourself. So you have the endless internal force to use the 6 Paul's divine swords. So now, probably enough for the martial art background. And Alice and Bob would like to use those divine swords for their security program to build it up. So we will dive in for each of them and we will explain some of the use cases. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's dive right in. So firstly, it's the Shaoshang sword, Shaoshang Jian, opening attacks, breaking through robust defenses, straightforward. And in cybersecurity, we also use robust and straightforward asset management. You can't protect what you don't know. You need to know what you're protecting, what's out there. So visibility is the foundation of governance. But how do we do that? Yup, there is a foundation that we need to build on first. Just like the one young finger in martial art analogy, in this case, is asset clarity. We need to know what's out there and then be able to manage them. So asset management is actually one of the core components in the program. So on the left-hand corner, we list out the industry control framework like NIST 853, ISO 27001, 222, and CIS control version 8. They all have asset management part of their framework. But what are the core components of asset management? It would be asset inventory, data classification, identity mapping, and cloud visibility. And how do we implement it? We can use CMDB, discovery agents, system data flow diagrams that will tell us how data flows in and out between the systems. An automated asset discovery tool, data labeling, or DSPM, the data security posture management tool, will be able to see what data is out there and where are they located. So here is an example of Alice and Bob. The airline usually have the web server that customer will purchase the airfare ticket on their website, and the database behind it. And of course, Alice and Bob will have the laptop with them. So these are the asset name of each, and we identify if they are external facing or internal facing. And also we identify how many accounts are there. Are they regular account or admin privilege account? We're moving on to the next sword, the Shaoyang sword, Shangyang sword, Shangyang Jian. Ingenious, difficult to fathom, unpredictable angles, and deceptive trajectories. With all unknown threats out there and zero vulnerabilities that doesn't really have the patch yet, we really want to use the risk management to manage the risk for the business. From technical issues to business impact. What does that really mean to business if a service is down? Or firewall rules is not setting up correctly? Not all threats deserve equal effort. Risk is actually a decision tool, not a fear amplifier to get us worried or overwhelmed. So how do we implement it? So this is also a core component in the security program. We can see all of the control list this component in their framework again. What are the core components of risk management? It would be risk register, laying out likelihood and impact, and the risk responses that being applied so that the risk can be reduced from inherent risk to residual risk. And how do we implement? We can use asset risk tagging and BIA, business impact assessment scoring, to categorize those assets, to rank them down. What assets are critical? What assets are not so critical? And we can then use a qualitative or quantitative assessment to assess the risk. Those approaches are good and for sure useful. But if you really want to get down to the numbers calculation, the FAIR risk framework, FAIR, that is something, the tool you want to look into. And a quick example for Alice and Bob again, they have the asset inventory set up already as here. They just add the rank and the RTO for it. They just rank the asset. So like web server in this case will be ranked high because their RTO, they only allow up to 6 hours downtime, whereas database can be up to 12 hours. And the laptops is ranked low because that allow more downtime. So the next we are looking at the third sword, 中冲 sword, 中冲剑, engaging multiple opponents simultaneously, sustained energy projection, powerful momentum. In cybersecurity, we also engage multiple assets by scanning their vulnerabilities and managing them. The people will think scanning is the security, but actually it's not. Scanning, it's easily implemented, right? It's for sure useful because it scans the data in your environment and it scans all the vulnerabilities that they have in your environment. But prioritization is hard, and how to management is hard. But luckily, linking vulnerability score with asset criticality will help. And again, this is the core component of security program. And what are the core components? CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, that gives the scores to each vulnerability. But does that mean that's a real business risk for us? Probably not, because those vulnerabilities out there probably not applicable to us because we don't have that system associated to that vulnerability. So exposure context matters. And if vulnerability is applicable to us and how we patch them in a timely manner. How do we implement this? Of course, the scanning tool that we can have that in place. And how do we patch and even patch effectively? We can automate the patch. We would like to minimize false positives, which sometimes it needs the investigation if that is not so straightforward. And again, linking vulnerabilities to the assets will help us to triage the vulnerabilities in the proper manner. And a quick example is here. Threat modeling or tabletop exercise. It can be the paper-based even. But we can also use the scanning scope, the scanning tool, and we can set up the scope. It could be internal-facing devices, external-facing devices, internal scan, external scan, and what are the frequencies of the scan. It can be monthly, daily, or even annually against different types of devices, including servers, databases, or laptops, etc. So with only one vulnerability management control, it's not enough. We need more controls for sure. So the fourth sword, Guanchong sword, victory through stagnant simplicity, invaluable in defensive situations. So in cybersecurity, we would want to use a simple and systematic approach to defend ourselves by selecting proper controls. The policies are for sure good, but they're also for sure not enough, right? Policies are usually administrative control, but they are not technically will protect the data from going out or unauthorized access coming into the system, right? And with all those controls we select, we want to have the periodic review, the continuous assurance, making sure that is still applied to us and effective. And on the left corner, if you have a sharp eye, you probably notice that CIS control version 8 is not listed out here. But it doesn't mean that selecting control is not important or less important than the others. It just means that because CIS control itself is already limited list, that's already help us to finalize the list for the essential controls that we should implement. So that's why it's already considered the selecting the great control. So what are the core components of selecting the controls? We need to consider the regulatory environment or the standards in the environment, in the countries that we are at, in the industry we are in. Like Taiwan, we have PDPA, Personal Data Protection Act, CDMA, CSMA, Cybersecurity Management Act. In EU, they have GDPR. The US healthcare has the HIPAA, right? And what's the framework that we can use to build up the control set? And we need to identify the ownership in the organization so that we can ensure those controls are implemented correctly. And we are also need to tailor those control description, because they are definitely not one size for all companies, right? Some of the controls might fit larger company, whereas small companies might not be able to do it or not applicable to them. So how do we implement it? We would want to use control mapping or crosswalk to really look into those framework or the laws or standards that applying to us, and what are the differences. Maybe they are talking about the same thing, but what we can do, can we do them all? So know your environment externally and internally and externally is important. So the quick example outlined here, they are already, security professional have already done the work for us. The 少中见, light agility and swift speed, unique single point focus, hitting vital points. In cybersecurity world, we often have logs swiftly forwarded to a single centralized point to enable us to do the full continuous monitoring. We need to know and be notified when controls fail. Controls are only useful if they work. A control is real only when it is testable. And a SIEM is actually the tool that can be the eyes of continuous monitoring. What do I mean by that? This diagram illustrates the SIEM in the middle is a central point that collects all the logs, the syslogs and the data from different sources. It could be antivirus software, it could be email gateway, network devices, firewall, IDS, servers, and even endpoints that allow the security practitioners, that you and me, to further investigate the and what are the core components of it? Yeah, we just talked about the SIEM system that give us visibility that we can validate control effectiveness. But sometimes the data is probably not available in SIEM. Maybe that is not so technical, so it doesn't have the log to be forwarded. So we don't have it. So we still need to collect the data from the stakeholders. And how do we do that? It's by firstly prioritizing the logs and what are the logs that needs to be ingested, and then set up the rules that for SIEM to aggregate and come up with the alerts that we want to be notified. And of course, build up the partnership with the stakeholder, with the leadership, the different departments, so we have the good relationship with them, and then also collect something that we need. Example for this, if we want to be notified of privilege escalation event, we will want to ingest the logs, Windows security logs, if the environment is Windows. If that's Linux, it would be a Linux logs, right? Auth log, authentication log from Linux. And in SIEM or the other tool, we'll have the correlation rules and detection rules set up by looking at the event ID 4672, a special privilege granted by a logon, and followed by 4624, the successful logon, to be able to have that risk, the alert triggered if something happened. And we are able to investigate who, where, which privileges were granted. And for those control testing or the continuous monitoring that we are doing, is the goal is to reduce the risk. Lastly, the 少则见, 少则 sword, left little finger creating a symmetric tactic, unique transformation and adaptation. With all those changes happen internally or externally, we need to be adaptive or getting the feedback from stakeholder, from a leadership, and even for outside advisory. The security is a living loop. It doesn't really have the start date or the end date. Maybe some task within the program. But overall, it's a continuous process. Getting feedback is the path to resilience. And resilience is the topic of this year's CyberSec conference. We want to getting mature, and getting maturity requires reflection. And what are the core components here? We could host a feedback meeting, we generate monitoring reports, we can schedule management review. And we want to really think kind of reversely to like, what could we do better? What could we have done? And what can we do better to adjust? If something happened, what can we learn from it? And what kind of reports that can be shown to management or shown to the security practitioner so we can better monitor the status or even be triggered by the alerts? What about the risk heat map provided to the stakeholders or the leadership? And here is a quick example followed by the example that we use in continuous monitoring SWORD. If the incident really happened after privilege escalation attack, maybe we think we need the SIEM in our environment, and that's redesigning controls. Maybe we need the multi-factor authentication policy enabled for privileged accounts. Maybe update the logout attempts from 10 to 5. And those sorts what we just talked about, it can really stand alone on itself when applying the PDCA model that's shown on the screen here, which is introduced by ISO 9001 and 27001. 6 pause device sorts: asset management, risk management, vulnerability management, control design and selection, continuous monitoring, and feedback. But those can be the components for robust security program. But it won't be sustainable until the last piece that we talk about. Just like the Beiming divine power in the martial art world, the internal force for cybersecurity is the government engine, the governance and executive support. Without governance, security decays. Governance is the drivers of sustainability. Without the proper governance support or executive support, which is basically top-down approach, in my view, the bottom-up approach won't even work. Imagine the people from the bottom, they want to present the management review to the top, and they don't have the governance support. That review meeting probably won't be happening. And there would be no budget alignment for the security effort, and no continuous funding for them if they want to purchase a tool like SIEM or vulnerability management. And then lastly, the talent investment. And I would want to really call out to managers or leadership, please invest your people. And they definitely need to learn and grow from it, and they will need your support. As we wrap up, I would like to use this pyramid to illustrate how each piece is related to each other. This all robust security program cannot be sustainable by the internal force that will keep the robust security program going. The car needs the fuel and the gas so that the wheel can continue to go on the road, to keep it going, to keep it raised in the racetrack. So each piece or each sword, if they keep running and running and running, and eventually it back to the asset still, where the important asset, the data, is located. And the data is the goal. The security is complicated, not because of technology, but it's fragmentation which needs integration. So now Alice and Bob successfully built their robust security program. Yay! And they have the comment like this: like Kung Fu, true security mastery is not about having more tools, but sustaining aligned internal power. This session has been useful for you, and I'm sure that you will be able to apply the knowledge right away. Keep sharpening your sword in cybersecurity. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.